in terms of unpacking the climate change as a concept, there are processes which ultimately then lead us to climate change. So I will start with the basic steps or the basic processes that lead us to climate change, of which the starting point is air pollution, which I'm sure from our educational background, term air pollution started featuring in the early stages of our education, basically in primary education. So I will not be defining what pollution is, but I would rather be talking about what pollution entails. So pollution, air pollution, to be precise, is caused by the greenhouse gas emission. Greenhouse gas emissions, it's when we say greenhouse gas emissions, it sounds so scientific, but it's very simple. We're just talking about carbon dioxide, we are talking about methane gases, we are talking about chlorofluorocarbons, carbon monoxide, those gases that from our basic knowledge from primary, which were taught about that actually emanate as a result of incomplete combustion or incomplete burning of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, we are talking about coal, talking about petroleum. So those gases that are released into the atmosphere, and if they continue to accumulate in the atmosphere, they lead to what is called air pollution, which is the first stage that lead us to, as we go, that would lead us to climate change. So now I've already mentioned about the greenhouse gases. So as air pollution continues to happen in our atmosphere, it leads us to the second stage, which is the greenhouse effect. So what is the greenhouse effect? So as these gases continue to mount and pile into the atmosphere, the effect which they then result into is what we then refer to as the greenhouse effect. I want to simplify the concept of greenhouse effect with a very with a simple example. Let's take it in winter. When it is winter time, it is very cold. And when it comes to bedtime, what do? We have to have enough blankets, is it, to ensure that we trap the heat that comes from our body. The blankets that we pile on our body doesn't generate heat. It is actually our own body that generates the heat. And that heat, as it escapes our body, it creates a condition which would then make us feel cold. So in this instance, the blankets or the jackets that we put on top of our body traps that heat and makes sure that it doesn't escape our body. Therefore, we then feel warm. This is similar to what happens now as we talk about the greenhouse effect. So our Earth in on itself doesn't generate heat, but there is a radiation which comes from the sun. So this radiation, as it comes to our Earth, some of it is used as light, some of it is then converted into heat through our surfaces. So when that radiation reaches our Earth's surface, it is reflected. Some of it is reflected back. Some of it is converted into heat. So that heat, which is now escaping our Earth's surface, as it tries to escape back into into space, it is then trapped by what? By those greenhouse gases which would have accumulated as a result of air pollution. Therefore, we then start to realize that is when we have that stage where we start to talk about the greenhouse effect. Because that heat which will then be trapped, it means it would start to alter some systems, and it has some effects which then subsequently follow. What effects we are talking about now? Increasing temperature in the Earth system. So that is the another important phenomenon which we really need to understand as we move on to explain climate change. So now we have the greenhouse effect. The continuous effect of greenhouse effect, I'm sure most of us, we have heard about the term global warming. Global warming, yes, there is a slight confusion. Some refer to climate change as global warming. And of recent, I think with continuous research and also availability of information, now people are starting to realize the difference. I would try also through this discussion, this presentation, to also highlight the kind of difference which exists between global warming and climate change. So I've talked about the greenhouse effect and about that radiation which is now trapped in the Earth's surface due to greenhouse gases, and then now leading to global warming. So global warming, what is it? I said in my introduction, I will try by all means to shy away from definitions. For those that would want definitions, there are lots of definitions on the internet, and I would encourage, in the interest of those that would want to further their knowledge and understanding of these terms, to make reference to the internet. So now, in simpler terms, global warming, we are just talking about that radiation which is now trapped in the atmosphere and cannot escape back into the space. And now, as we start to realize, as we start to have that heat being trapped, now we see temperatures rising, and now we start also to realize that some other processes such as evapotranspiration and also drying up of water bodies, because with the evapotranspiration, we are just talking about evaporation as a result of the warming that is happening, and also the drying up of the earth as a result of the warming that is coming through the greenhouse effect. That in itself, I would say, in simpler terms, is what we will be referring to as the global warming process. So the global warming process now, the global warming effect is the one that then now the effects that will be realized due to global warming will lead us now into what we call climate change. So for us to project the changes that will be happening in the climate system, for us to be in a position to say, yeah, now this is now climate change. This is actually estimated over a long period of time, usually 25 to 30 year period. That is the period that is usually used with the meteorological service departments. But I would say now on climate change, what climate change, what is now that which we are referring to as climate change. So the global warming effect then affects the climate system. But when I'm talking about climate system, we know about our traditional seasons, the alterations now, due to all those processes that I have highlighted in my previous submission, are the ones that then be impacted. And as they are impacted, they start to alter the usual behavior of our climate system or our weather system. Let me simplify to say, you start to realize now the variations and the deviations that would be starting to happen on our daily temperatures, even our seasons, they start to now not becoming so predictable. Those changes which would be emanating from the warming effect of global warming. And you would also even start to realize that even the precipitation amounts will start also to increase. In some instances, will decrease. So those the alterations which would have happened over a period of time from through those stages that I have explained, is what will then lead us to what we call climate change. So now it has become evident because in terms of the effects, what we are now experiencing. I would speak for Zimbabwe, the sudden increase in natural disasters. They talk about the cyclonic events that have affected the eastern parts of our country. Yes, it was normal that we used to receive these cyclonic events, but now, if you look at the frequency, even the intensity, and the magnitudes of these natural hazards, all these point to the effects of climate change. In some instances, we have also recorded some drought situations which have been so severe, and also you would realize that even our farming or our rain seasons, they are no longer that predictable. We used to know that by October, the end of October, we are receiving our first rains. Now we are receiving our first rains as late as beginning of December, and even these rain seasons are now even prolonging, and everything is now no longer that predictable, which now leads us to climate change. But also, let me reiterate that climate change is a natural process, but the one that is of key interest is the one that has been influenced or has been caused by human interference. Human interference, how? Through those processes which I have highlighted, from air pollution, greenhouse effects, and also global warming, and later on to the changes that have happened into our climate system. So, what can be done about climate change? I will not speak about solutions at a global level, but I'll try to cascade down to what we can do as individuals or at our community. To start with, I'm glad we have got the business sector as part of this discussion. Like I have highlighted, the major cause of climate change are the greenhouse gas emissions. So what do we really need to do? We need to replace fossil fuels with renewable energy technologies. We talk about power generation. Instead of investing in fossil fuels such as diesel, coal, and so forth, there are now cleaner technology options that are now available in terms of solar, in terms of biogas. There could also be other options in terms of hydro systems, electric hydro systems. Those are some of practical interventions that can be done to address climate change. Why we are trying to ensure that we minimize the continuous increase of carbon footprint into the atmosphere, and try to address the future occurrences of climate change, and limiting also the continued increase in terms of the earth temperature, earth surface temperature, which then also lead to those other issues which I've talked about in global warming. There is also another potential in tree planting. I'm glad here through the Grow Tree Foundation, which is also a very noble initiative in terms of trying to respond to climate change. Trees, they play a significant role in offsetting in sequestrating the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is why, because of the quantities of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and also because of those natural processes of photosynthesis, trees, they play a very important role in tapping and removing carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and thereby also reducing the potential of greenhouse effect in our atmosphere. So tree planting is one very important step or activity or intervention in addressing climate change. But overall, what is key is also changing our human behavior or consuming behavior. We need also at individual level to be responsible. Sometimes you walk into a room, it's well ventilated, there's enough light, but you would see people, they would just switch on lights and just consuming and becoming unnecessary. That is unnecessary wastage, because as we do that, we are also creating demand for power generation. And what does that mean? It means it reverses back. We need now to use more of fossil fuel to provide for our light. Sometimes even there is an encouragement. I know no context Zimbabwe tinoshandisira kufamba nemota and so forth. And sometimes we also use our vehicles for some distances, which we might also be using other alternatives, which are good for our Earth. As we try to commemorate our Earth Day, it is important also to think about how we can also minimize our 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 waste. I'm glad also with the business sector, there is also the issue on circular economy in terms of how can we make use of the waste or regenerate the waste through recycling processes to power and support some of our initiatives. So I think from the business end, it would also be important for the business sector to also look in terms of how they can also be involved in the circular economy. Two, how they can also be involved in greening their operations by substituting fossil power technologies with renewable energy technologies. At individual level, try by all means to minimize waste. And for the waste that we have generated, try also to recycle it and reuse it again and reduce the burden and pressure on our earth. Thank you. Over to you, facilitator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chemere. That was a very informative presentation. I am very sure we have all learned something about what climate change causes are, what solutions you as an individual can do, what solutions you can do as a corporate. And it's not even that complicated or big things. So I am so grateful, Mr. Chemere, for a wonderful presentation from you. Moving on with our program, our next presentation is going to come from Dr. Mzeza, one of the board members for Grow Tree Foundation. He is a climate change expert, and he is going to teach, educate, and bring awareness to us on strategies that we can undertake to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So over to you, Dr. Mzeza. Hello, Dr. Mzeza.
I was muted. Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Mzeza. Thank you so much. Over to you.
My sincere apology. I never noticed that my mic was muted. I had mentioned that I want to applaud the previous speaker who has shared with us his perspectives about climate change and what is happening. And he has clarified quite a number of concepts. But to start my own conversation on this subject matter on strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, I want to premise my conversation with you that, as the previous speaker has mentioned, climate change is a reality and we cannot ignore it anymore. And indeed, greenhouse gases are being emitted on a daily basis as the different countries are on a path to industrialize, and that again is impacting adversely in terms of what we are experiencing now, which our colleague, previous speaker mentioned. It is again a global issue which impacts locally, and we talk of globalization. So it has become a huge nexus between what happens even in Europe can affect Zimbabwe, can affect Malawi, can affect Ethiopia, Nigeria, and many parts of the developing world, regardless that we may not be primarily responsible for, polluting the environment. Fundamentally, it is an environmental, social, and economic issue now, as the issue of climate change, the issue of greenhouse gases are so ubiquitous that we are prompted to some action in order to correct these problems. However, as you may have noticed within the environmental marketplace, the climate marketplace, it appears that there is no quick fix to this problem, and there is no silver bullet to it as we engage because of our differences as countries and as stakeholders with regards to how best we can tackle to deal with the problem of climate change, and particularly in my presentation on how we can, deal and address the issues of greenhouse gases, because different partner countries are at different levels of development, and hence they have got their different timelines in terms of how they can address the issues. Of course, at global level, there is consensus. But when it comes now to implementation within the context of NDCs, nationally determined contributions, countries are at variance in terms of how they've set their timelines to comply with the certain targets that have been set within the context of the IPCC. And for that reason, we continue to experience risk climate events. And I think Zimbabwe now is not new to this phenomenon. And we have had the cyclones this year that affected the country. And just some few days ago, you noticed what was happening. It's the reality of climate change that we are going through. Now, there is indeed an unequivocal detection of the enhanced greenhouse effect from observations that have scientifically been made, and this seems to be increasing. Global temperature is going up, which is indeed a manifestation of well-balanced evidence that suggests discernible human influence on global climate. And therefore, that evidence is sufficient enough to justify certain interventions that are very strategic, which we need to do at various levels, national, right down to community level. I always mention that communities are the point of intervention application, and anything done without them for them may not be sustainable and will not succeed. And the emphasis that I always make is that any intervention, be it the nationally determined contributions, they must be localized. Yes, the frameworks exist at global level, at national level, but how far do we go in terms of cascading those interventions? But at the technical formulation stage again, we always find some disjunctures insofar as, consummation of the intervention strategies are concerned. And it's a problem. It's a planning problem. It's a management problem in this discourse of climate change. So most of the observed increases in globally average temperatures since the mid-20th century is very likely to continue due to the observed, of course, anthropogenic activities which are contributing towards gas emissions, and hence its concentration that alters, of course, the temperature variations that we are going through as countries and as regions. And Africa is one continent which I can cite now is experiencing these negative, risky climate events. And it has had tremendous impact on food and human security, as well as the environment, the devastations that you are seeing. What has happened in Durban, which is the most recent catastrophe, it's quite regrettable, and indeed it tells us a lot in terms of what humanity should do in order to reverse what we have caused. So basically, future emission scenarios clearly point to the fact that there is an increase in emissions, and it will continue probably in the next decade or more. And there's scientific evidence to that, and I will share with you the graphical presentations looking at the year 2000 up to 2100. And clearly, there seem to be projections indicating that unless something is done, the trend will be on an incremental trajectory in terms of, global temperature going up. And it puts us in a sense of urgency in terms of addressing these issues. So there has to be definitely interventions to decrease the emissions. And this 21st century, I think the clarion call is much louder to progressively and aggressively reduce emissions, which is likely to increase if not something is not done because of industrial and other anthropogenic activities taking place in the global economic ecosystems, right? I will not dwell much about the impacts because my colleague looked at the various aspects, but safe to mention that the impact is right across all the human facets of life. Your health is affected, and we have talked about weather-related events. I'm talking here particularly weather-related mortalities that we are experiencing, let alone infections that are a result of, climate change, your waterborne related diseases, air quality, respiratory problems or illness that you can think of, and the impact in terms of health. He mentioned about, how, extreme sun heat can alter your own health. So you can easily understand it from that perspective. So health is one area where humanity has gotten interest, and without good health, definitely we are in jeopardy. Agriculture will be affected. The entire food supply chain will be interfered with. Extreme temperatures and impact on agro productivity and food systems. It's an area that is of major concern to human survival. Impact on crop yields, and then the capital demands in terms of irrigation systems that you then need to employ to adapt, to climate change. Forests composition. Some of the geographic range of forests are disappearing right now. And you have been witnessing even some of the developments in the Amazon region, what has been happening, and we call it the global land. And the destruction taking place, even outbreaks of uncontrollable fires, attributed to climate change. So we are basically witnessing those inordinate climate risk events taking place and affecting our global capacity for carbon sequestration. And it has got a huge impact, including also health because the forests play an important role, for the absorption of carbon that we are very much worried about. Then water resources, definitely depletion of it, be it surface and underground water, and also events, in the North Pole and pole areas where you have witnessed some ice melting and all that, glaciers melting and all that, and the impact thereof in terms of the sea levels. The countries, the blue economy countries, island nations, they are at risk as we speak, and it's all attributed actually to climate change. Then coastal areas, definitely, that I've mentioned about island nations, beaches, and how that is increasing the risk of communities, to various threats, including cyclones. Of course, species and natural areas that you all know, loss of habitat and species, they are diminishing, and it's a threat to humanity. And of course, overall, you have witnessed unprecedented, sometimes unprecedented precipitation, which also affects, productivity in one way or the other. So I just mentioned that, but these things were mentioned by my colleague to run through the entire, elements that we can start to think about in terms of how we are affected as countries and as individuals. But looking at it from that angle of health, you look at your agriculture, your forests, your water resources, your coastal areas, and the species composition. Maybe these issues can alert us to the risks that we are experiencing. And then the entire hydrological system, the warmer the environment becomes, the more precipitation we can experience, and the destruction also. We need something that is even and normal, you see. So that creates a huge imbalance in terms of transpiration, in terms of ocean levels, in terms of the form of soil, in terms of stream flows, in terms of vegetation, and the entire ecosystem can have serious imbalances. But the primary problem coming, of course, from climate change, and these, greenhouse gases, we believe, and we are agreeable as scientists that they are responsible for the alteration of our climate. Now, zeroing in now to the strategies that we can look at. And my summary point of the entire intervention to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is that we simply need a low carbon environment, and therefore we need low carbon interventions. And by low carbon interventions, we are basically trying to create a low carbon future. And that future hinges on specific issues which I'm going to mention. One of them should, as an intervention strategy, to look at industrial strategy. Currently, our industries, what drives their productivity? If you look at countries such as your use of coal in industries and many other parts of the world, even here. When people went to Glasgow, I think you are aware that one of the presentations made by our own country focused on investment in coal, which is debt energy. When the whole world is seismically shifting from debt energy to clean energy solutions. I'm highlighting this so that we reflect as a country, as Zimbabwe, because these issues are closer to us in terms of our energy supply to power our industries. What are we doing about that? What is our strategy to migrate from debt energy to clean energy? Coal is not in the global scheme of things in terms of the future clean energy solutions to what we are talking about. So there must be an industrial strategy that must address that area. I'm not going to be prescriptive, but I will indicate potential areas, right? As an intervention strategy, again, we need to look at sustainable supply chains. For example, in the agriculture sector, the entire interrogation of the supply chain of agriculture, or take any sector. I wouldn't want to mention agriculture alone, but look at any sector. Look at the transport sector, the entire supply chain of the transport sector. So you take sustainable supply chains and locate it within any sector, and then you interrogate to say, okay, what is it that we can do in order to reduce carbon emissions? If you take it in the transport sector, there is migration from fossil fuels to, renewable, energy supply. Lithium batteries. Fortunately, as a country, we are one of the countries endowed with lithium. But the speed of execution in terms of exploiting that resource, establish a requisite infrastructure to produce lithium batteries so that we become competitive in this migration process. It's something that needs to be dealt with by different sectors within the government systems. But sustainable supply chains across all the sectors, transport, your agriculture, and so forth and so on. We can see where the synergies are and where we can leverage to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Better buildings and net zero neighborhoods. We must start to think about that. I'm happy that Grow a Tree Foundation, in its wisdom, to create a model climate smart village in Rushinga, he has gone a step further in conceiving this climate smart village where it is leveraging solar, to create a new environment that is sustainable. So we must look at all those opportunities and balance our act, our buildings, our own household buildings, our own office spaces. They are potential, outpost of power generation. And this is not something that people can start to worry about. We have our buildings already, and it's a question of getting the act together and create better buildings that are net zero in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. We can leverage that and move away from all the other sources of energy. And in that context, I've already talked about carbon-free electricity generation, and it involves quite a number of areas. Some of them I'll mention later, your wind, the solar that I talked about. And fortunately, according to the World Climate Agency, we are adjudged to be one of the best countries in terms of climate. Fortunately, almost the entire continent receives about 90% sunshine. That is Africa. But if you check how much of that power we have failed dismally to harness over the decades, it's quite a pity that we have not done much. We could be a net exporter of solar energy as a continent. And of course, we have got countries that have done very well. Egypt, they've tried their best. Kenya, they are trying. They've got the biggest wind turbine farm. And Egypt leading in terms of having the biggest solar field. But coming to Southern Africa, we are not seeing a lot of activities in terms of carbon-free electricity, carbon-free electrification of households. And I've mentioned that each household in Zimbabwe is a potential outpost of clean energy generation. And that's what Grow a Tree Foundation is doing in Rushinga by harnessing solar energy for irrigation of community gardens, for household power supply. I am aware that they've been distributing energy efficient cook stoves. And that again is addressing these issues. And these are small but very important interventions that, if they are harnessed and supported fully, they can go 1,000 miles in terms of assisting our communities to graduate from fossil fuel supply to clean energy supply. And we have got that capacity. Then the issue of education and training becomes very key as part of the strategy. To what extent is our curriculum, to what extent are our community centers able to impart knowledge about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, how we can minimize that? So education and training becomes very important. Let's not look at institutionalized systems of education, but in a rudimentary manner in our own communities, we can achieve something in terms of, supporting communities to raise the profile of their awareness about greenhouse emissions at domestic level. We can teach something there. And I am aware that Mr. Manyanga will talk about investments and financing of, some of these projects and partnerships. But it's an area also whereby we are saying those who have got a responsibility to also support who have not. Ourselves, developing countries, the so-called third world countries, something that should be looked at as well. So he will talk about that. So I've mentioned about industrial strategy, how we can integrate industrial design in our own approaches to minimize emissions of greenhouse gases in every sector, be it agriculture, be it transport, industries, and so forth and so on. But ultimately, all that builds to one thing. We want a low carbon future, reduction of fossil fuel production, take advantage of carbon-free electricity production, better buildings and net zero neighborhoods, sustainable supply chains. You can locate them in any of the sectors, and you can actually see the opportunities in terms of what can be done within that sector. I said I don't want to be very prescriptive because of time. I want to rush through so that I quickly conclude my presentation. So I've talked about issues of renewable energy and efficiency, which I talked about, and what Grow a Tree Foundation is also doing in Rushinga. And I think and I pray that they'll expand going forward in terms of ensuring that they implement these efficient programs, use of energy efficient cook stoves, solar systems, and so forth and so on. Wind energy, I did mention about it as an intervention, biomass opportunities that we have, tidal power opportunities. Those ones who are blessed with the tidal power, the coastal countries, they can take advantage of that. I've been to countries that I've witnessed how they are exploiting sea tidal power, for generation of power, which is very, very important intervention. Hydro energy, the capacity we have in Africa, I'm talking, more of Africa because we have got so much capacity. The Congo River, you talk of Inga Dam, Inga hydropower station in the Democratic Republic of Congo, has got the capacity to power almost 3/4 of the continent. But what investment have we done as a continent? The African Union, that talks so much about these issues, including, clean energy. The Africa we want, the Africa we want is a clean Africa. The Africa we want is a clean Africa with sustainable energy. And in the context of that continental strategic plan, how far are countries committing and committed to implement these interventions? Buildings, I talked about them. They are potential power generators. Just put solar panels, dismantle all the unclean energy supply systems and put clean energy supply systems. And the issue of, appropriate technologies, smart technologies come in that perspective, right? The transport sector, I mentioned about it, intelligent transport system, not only intelligent, but clean. Provision of, lithium powered automobiles is the next generation that we are witnessing. Britain, by 2030, they are currently scaling down, fossil powered automobiles, and they put a plan that by 2030, they will be migrating to lithium. And we must be very careful as a country. We must be very careful as a continent. Are we not going to be the dumping space for antiquated, dirty energy technologies in the areas of, coal power generation? And also these vehicles, I'm aware that we are importing quite a lot of vehicles, second-hand vehicles for that matter, but we don't have an option in that perspective. But do we understand the global movement whereby there is migration to now electric powered vehicles? Lithium, we have it here in Mashonaland East, in Mashingo, and I think in other parts of the country, we have it. what can we do to ensure that we embrace this new dispensation in terms of, the migration that we are anticipating to start, manufacturing and exporting lithium batteries, because they are going to play an important role in powering our automobiles. Right. Another issue that I wanted to mention also is from an adaptation point of view, because you cannot successfully address issues of greenhouse gas emissions from a strategy point of view without looking at what the communities can do, and that brings in issues of adaptation and mitigation. And already communities are being impacted negatively in terms of their commerce, trade, and the production. So we have, as mentioned by my colleague, we have experienced in the past and currently, this is now uncertainties. Rainfall concerns, sometimes droughts, extreme temperatures, and so forth and so on, habitat and ecosystems loss, health and public safety have become issues. Resource industry sectors, especially those ones relying on agriculture, they are being impacted. And quite clearly, the globe is likely to have serious food shortages in the wake of population growth and the climate change also doing playing its part. So we cannot have this do nothing attitude and do nothing approach, which basically will result in a greater cost, vulnerability, and risk. So community risk assessment becomes very important. And I did mention about the NDCs. And the NDCs that we have, in my view, will need some revisiting and review to ensure that we localize them to create a climate-proof society and have climate-proof development decisions. And the template, I think, is there already. Why?
Apologies. Apologies, Dr. Mzeza. May you probably conclude in a minute so that we can have our next speaker as well?
Finished now. So I was saying in my summary, the interventions must look at climate proofing development decisions. That is at a strategic policy level. If we are to address comprehensively greenhouse gas emissions, and it involves, different stakeholders coming together to tackle the issues. And I am emphasizing the issue of community orientation, and even the awareness issues must tackle and address things from a community perspective in which they play an important role. In short, the strategies should be complemented by a management strategy, which must involve raising public awareness of the challenges posed by greenhouse gases, and seek to change the circumstances, focusing on adaptation and mitigation. Then knowledge management itself becomes very important. And I mentioned about issues of training, education and training, which then speak to developing a better understanding of the details of greenhouse gas challenges, which then prompts us to change scenarios to inform policies and programs to reduce negative impacts. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mzeze. Dr. Mzeza, that was a very informative presentation in line with strategies that help to reduce greenhouse gases. I'm very sure all the corporates in the house can agree with me that there are so many strategies we can embark on as Zimbabwean corporates to help in reducing greenhouse gas emissions within the world. Not wasting much of our time, we want to leave this time to Mr. Ndamba, the CEO for INSAF, to give us a presentation on climate laws and regulations that can assist corporates and that are beneficial to corporates when embarking on green investment opportunities. Over to you, Mr. Ndamba.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Allow me to just share some few slides that I had prepared to guide my presentation here. And my apology, I couldn't join you earlier because of being speaking also on the same issues in China this morning. So, but nonetheless, I'm glad I'm here. So my presentation, I'll talk about climate laws and regulations as drivers for business climate action in Zimbabwe. And thank you so much. I think from the previous speaker, there are quite a couple of very interesting points coming out. I hope you can all hear me.
Kindly yes, we can hear you, sir.
Thank you so much.
We can hear you, Mr. Ndamba.
Yes, yeah. So in terms of the actions, from all the strategy, they talk about the strategy. And so my talk here and presentation within these few minutes, a few slides, are really going to be focusing more on action. And from the previous TV interview that I was in China, all our conversations were about actions. And we all have to agree that a lot of the things that we are talking about on climate change, we are fully aware of this and what needs to be done. We are all aware of it. We are all aware of the strategies of what needs to be done. But what is key is what are the actions that we actually need to take now, and what are we holding and what do we have? So my presentation here will talk about 4 aspects. One, the global climate regulatory developments and the transitions that are actually taking place, such that we do not find ourselves within the African continent, within Zimbabwe, having to do a lot of catch-up. Then I'll talk about, public sector instruments in Zimbabwe as of now, and also the private sector instruments that can drive climate actions, and the ones that we should actually by now monitoring. What is it that our public sector institutions and private sector companies and institutions doing now? And my last will be the call for action. I think that is what is going to make a difference. So at the global level or international level, there are transitions that are taking place so fast when it comes to climate action. You'll find that there are various instruments and laws that are now extending or finding their way into international trade agreements and financing arrangements, that you find that even developing countries in Africa, including our country, Zimbabwe, we may find ourselves being pushed further away from development because we can't meet or we have not been taking very strong actions in terms of integrating and incorporating some of the global developments. For example, New Zealand, the US, Canada, Singapore, and the EU have moved to make climate reporting mandatory to force businesses to report on their actions. And recently, I think just two days ago, Canada is the last one that I picked out that have now made it mandatory for climate reporting by businesses. And the US, through the Securities Exchange Commission, they now require companies to include climate reports in their filing with the Register of Companies. Lastly, also in the accountants profession, they've also come through with the setting up of the International Sustainability Standards Board, which was launched in Glasgow during the COP27, and which has now prioritized climate reporting. So this is basically driving climate action by businesses. So with effective, I think from the coming year, all financial statements or financial reports have to come accompanied by sustainability information, and the priority at the moment is climate reporting. So you can't report something that you have not done. So these are developments that we have to catch up so fast. In that way, we cannot continue to be talking a lot about climate change. What is now required is our actions. And this is why these developments are actually taking place. So coming to Zimbabwe, within the public sector or targeting public entities, what is it that they should have been doing by now, and what is it that we should have been doing to monitor whether these actions are actually taking place? So if you go to the Public Entities and Corporate Governance Act, you'll find in section 315 to 332, which talks about sustainability reporting. So this section covers climate actions or sustainability actions by parastatals, government departments, and state-owned entities. And their reporting should include what is it that they have done on economic, environmental, social, and governance using the Global Reporting Initiative standards. So these are international standards on ESG reporting. So the GRI environmental standards actually covers entities' disclosure for their actions and performance on energy, water, waste and effluent emissions. That covers scope 1 up to 3, and also their climatic emissions actions. It also covers biodiversity and environmental compliance. So this act is what our public or state entities and government departments should have been actually implementing, because this instrument has been there for quite some years. I think quite a couple of years. So by now we should be monitoring action rather than talking to them about what they should be doing. It's a law. If they are not doing it, they are actually breaking it. Then coming to the private sector in Zimbabwe, we have got statutory instrument 134 of 2019, the Securities and Exchange rules, which cover the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange listing requirements. So if you go to section 399 to 404 under sustainability information and disclosure. So this requires stock exchange listed companies to apply GRI standards in their reporting of their economic, environmental, social, and governance actions. And within those standards, similar to the public entities, the GRI environmental standard covers entities' disclosure on actions and performance on environment, on energy, water, waste, effluent, emissions, and also the climate action, and this is covered under climate reporting, and also business impacts on biodiversity and environmental compliance. So you can actually see from this that we already have it, and by now it's about action, which we should now be measuring. But what is it that we can do in terms of partnering for action? So the private sector can partner with the Grow a Tree Foundation using SDG 17, which is partnering for the goal to address SDG 15 on life on land. So this relates to, this could be tree planting programs that you can actually partner with them, and that is a demonstration of action. We should not be talking of what should be done. So there is need to measure our action. For example, carbon offsetting, planting trees, regenerating biodiversity. We can see within our urban areas, our wetlands have been destroyed. And we cannot theorize destruction of wetlands. It's about action in restoration and also preventing any further damage. Businesses can also be looking at measuring and tracking their greenhouse gas emissions, which is fast becoming a requirement for business. So as such, businesses in Zimbabwe need to be prepared for this being a market condition for products and services, where some of our exports may start struggling to enter international markets because we are not incorporating our climate actions in the way that we are operating our businesses. And lastly, our actions, if you look into our climate activities in Zimbabwe, you find a lot of these are targeted within rural communities. And yet a lot of the emissions are coming from businesses. Some of them are small businesses, your SMEs. What action are we taking, or what program do we have for SMEs on climate change? So the rural communities are the weaker ones. But if you come to the SMEs, the business sector, that's where the real action should be, because that's where a lot of the emissions are actually coming from. So let's be real. Only action can take us there, and we can't continue to theorize, but invest efforts on action. Our actions are judging us right now. If you look into the environmental phenomenon, so in this regard, even on a small scale, our actions are actually judging us. You look into our cities, Harare, Bulawayo, and so forth. We are struggling with water, but yet we are actually destroying the same sources for water, which is basically our wetlands. So those are some of the actions we need to be focusing on. In conclusion, let me say that let's consider the history we are leaving for the next generation as transient caretakers on planet Earth, because the creation of man by God, the first principle God gave us was to care and work for the garden. And the garden was full of trees. Why should we leave it destroyed? Why should we not obey God by making sure that we preserve our forests, our wetlands, not to destroy them for our economic interest? I thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ndamba. We are so grateful. And I think a key takeaway from your presentation for me was that we might fail to enter into international markets if we don't deal with our climate change issues in Zimbabwe. Lastly, we have a presentation from our very own Grow a Tree Foundation CEO, Mr. Manyanga, on investment and partnership opportunities available for corporates. Thank you so much. We want to leave this time to you, Mr. Manyanga.
Thank you, colleagues, and welcome. I'm very happy that we have managed to convene and have such an important event or webinar focusing on Earth Day, but also to give ourselves an update of what is happening. I don't know if you can see my screen. Can you confirm?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can see it, Manyanga.
Okay, thank you so much. So I'm happy with the presentation that have been done by the previous speakers, Dr. Mzisa and Ashford. They give a background to the whole issues that are critical, especially at the end of the day, we ask ourselves, so what? This is what is happening. These are the implications. So what for us as corporates, as business, as individuals? Because at the end of the day, it's all about our livelihoods, our survival, our legacy, and so forth. So in particular, the presentation that has been done by Mr. Ndamba from INSAF has been also critical when you see that regulations are tightening for corporates. It becomes very clear that we need a paradigm shift in the manner in which we operate. So just to give you a hint, currently what is happening is that the US is also tightened its regulations in terms of imports from all countries. When it comes to especially the food industry, the fuel industry, there's exceptions, of course, with oils, but for most imports that are getting into the US, as long as you do not disclose of your climate change impacts, they are closing business. So it is critical for companies, for corporates, to ensure that they comply with international rules and regulations governing climate change. So as Grow a Tree Foundation, we want to take this advantage to create an important platform for corporates in Zimbabwe to take advantage through this partnership, especially the ones that we are having with INSAF and other like-minded organizations like Action 24, to ensure that we are ahead and also that our industry is also well prepared for the storm that is coming. But not only that, to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. I spoke to one colleague at the World Bank who was bemoaning that of the available climate finance that is touted annually in Africa alone, less than 10% of corporates, individual organizations apply to tap into those resources for one reason or the other. But one key challenge has been lack of access to that information. People simply don't know what is happening. So they will be caught up and it will be unfortunate. So I'm looking into investment and partnership opportunities that are there for corporates. As Mr. Ndamba mentioned, that reporting on climate change is one critical element that is now a legal requirement in most spheres. I wanted to emphasize that it's not only reporting, but the question that comes from regulators, international investors is, okay, you have reported, but what are you doing about it? So the opportunities that are there, or the most important thing to do is, after reporting on a climate change impact, there is need to look into how you can offset your carbon footprint. So there are two ways of doing that. The first one is doing an internal offset, which is, for example, a company like Dairyboard may have a huge carbon footprint annually. That may come from its production line, that may come from its consumption of energy, that may come from its transportation systems, the whole running of its operations. So what it can do is to internally look into those systems and assess how it can reduce its emissions, improve efficiency, water and energy efficiency, and thereby reduce its carbon footprint. So this involves what Dr. Mzeza mentioned, ensuring that our buildings also act as renewable energy generators, so to speak. So, and also improve on water and energy efficiency. So that's one way. I'm also using an example of Dairyboard because it is, I've noted that one of our colleagues is here. So what Dairyboard can also do is to ensure that it also maybe change its whole transportation system and make it electric again. In that manner, it can also reduce its carbon footprint. But these investments do not come cheap. They are very expensive. They also disrupt the manner in which we operate. So we understand that it takes time. So as a foundation, we have come up with simple measures that will allow corporates to ensure that they comply with international regulations, but also they improve their image, corporate social image, as champions of the environment. So there are options through afforestation and reforestation programs, where we link our schools. We have a Green Schools initiative where we link our schools with corporates. So a company or corporate like Dairyboard can adopt a school of its own choice and begin to sponsor activities that will contribute to global greenhouse gas emissions and also to the international climate action agenda. So this can be through afforestation, planting of trees, provision of solar energy at these institutions, that is solar panels to power these schools to be off-grid. Again, the installation of biogas digesters. If you go to Senzingam High School, the whole school is powered by biogas, from their kitchen to the lighting system of the classrooms and teachers' quarters. So you can imagine the amount of trees that are saved from that investment alone. So again, it also sponsors proper waste management systems, waste separation, and also the promoting environmental education. So it's not only at schools that this can be done, it can be a community that is adopted through that corporate. So with our work that we'll also be doing with INSAF is to ensure that we champion the cause of these corporates to show and demonstrate that they are indeed committed to the climate change agenda, and they are also contributing to the reduction of their carbon footprint. And it is also an opportunity for this corporate to understand the actual measure of its carbon footprint. So we also offer those services where we calculate your annual carbon footprint and the investments that you do, and demonstrate how much it has reduced that carbon footprint. So in simple mathematics, we assess your carbon footprint, we offer you the opportunity to offset it through those activities that I mentioned, and then we then help you to improve as a corporate and continue your business while ensuring that you are reducing the damage that you are doing with the environment. So I've explained this issue already, the issue of afforestation and deforestation. And just to give an example, suppose a corporate has a carbon footprint of maybe 15,000 tons. A single tree has the capacity to absorb about 4 tons of CO2 equivalent per lifetime. Therefore, it can be calculated to figure out how much trees are needed to sequester that. In other words, if we find out that maybe the annual carbon footprint of dairy board is 20,000 tons, we then calculate if you are to choose the option of trees to be planted. That may lead to maybe 5,000 trees to offset that, that carbon footprint. So when 5,000 trees are planted at various schools and communities, we then monitor the growth of each and every tree that is planted, and we account for it on behalf of the report. And it will then offset that through the planting of trees. So this can also be the same with solar systems or biogas digesters, you name it. It will be of your choice as a corporate. But the catch beyond that is not just offsetting your carbon footprint annually. There is the potential for your investment to earn carbon credits, which is a catch for many corporates, those who are for-profit corporates. It is critical for us to tap into carbon finance because there are huge opportunities. As I speak, there are hundreds of companies, organizations from USA and Europe who are coming into Zimbabwe and pushing to invest in projects of just planting trees, protection of forests, or establishment of solar power plants, just offset their carbon footprint and generate carbon credits. Why? Because it is generating a lot of revenue for them. To give you an example, 2007 up to 2019, the price of CO2 per ton of carbon credits was selling at between $50 and $3 US. But when the signing of the Paris Agreement came into force in 2020, the price jumped. I think it skipped from it jumped from 15 US dollars. It moved up to 15 US dollars per ton per credit. So, and from 15 US dollars within a few months, it moved to between 15 and 50 US dollars. So in other words, one carbon credit is now generating a potential of 50 US dollars just from one credit. So there's potential revenue from that. A lot of revenue, actually beyond the amount of money that we earn from selling milk as dairy board, just to give an example. So there's need for corporates to have that paradigm shift and change and see the opportunities that are there in the climate crisis, and not just to see it as a crisis on its own. But there's a critical element when it comes to corporate social responsibility, that of ensuring that our communities in which we operate throughout the country, they are facing the climate crisis, and they need to be assisted or capacitated to have adaptive measures or adaptation measures that will empower them to be resilient to climate change. So part of our work as Great Tree Foundation is to program for rural communities in particular, and also even urban communities. We tailor-make different programs that will empower these communities. It covers fruit tree plantation, because if we just plant trees but earning nothing from it, it is a challenge. So again, we also encourage corporates to sponsor these programs where fruit trees are planted, and communities will start to earn money from that, and also to enhance their food and nutrition security. So what you see on these photos is a project that has been mentioned about from Rushinga. It also covers climate smart agricultural practices. It covers use of climate smart technologies, and it covers the issue of biomass cook stoves and sustainable forest management. All these are critical elements that we are looking into to empower communities. From what you see on the photos here, these are the technologies that we are talking about: solar-powered irrigation systems, and then ensuring food and nutrition security. This falls under the agenda of climate change adaptation for our communities, because while we've contributed less to the crisis of climate change, we are the most vulnerable and the most affected. Hence, we need to be empowered to adjust to these vagaries of climate change and ensure that our livelihoods are enhanced and not affected beyond that. So the same for solar. There are opportunities for investment in solar power plants, again, in-house as corporates, as I mentioned, and also maybe for communities. So there is need for us into looking into offering these opportunities for corporates, ensure that they can start to pilot some of these examples. This is an example of a biogas digester. Some of them I mentioned are placed in institutions. So we have a program for institutional biogas program, where we are looking into institutions like schools, boarding schools in particular, hospitals, clinics, and other public institutions that are critical or are consuming a lot of energy from the grid. But once we invest in this, we can actually take them off grid and also ensure that they reduce or completely avoid the use of firewood as a primary source of energy, especially for cooking. If you go to all our hospitals, they cook using gas, which is expensive, LPG, but they also generate a lot of waste that can be utilized from biogas digesters. So there's also need to look into sponsoring the issue of waste management again. So a corporate can choose to invest in a separation bins for its company or at a school or community of its choice. Again, we would then champion and ensure that the world is aware of the work that is being done by these corporates, as you can see from this picture. And Lastly, it is important to look into issues of energy efficiency. I tell you, if you look at what is happening in Zimbabwe right now, a lot of energy is wasted through inefficiencies. And if you check, especially with public buildings owned by councils and the government itself, you find lights are on during the night when they are not being used. Street lights are on during the day when they are supposed to be off. We are opening taps, brushing our teeth while the taps are running. We are wasting water. There are so many things that are happening that we are taking for granted, as if there is no climate crisis. But once people get to be aware of what is happening, there is need for a change of behavior. So this is where we are pushing that it is important for corporates to take the lead and not just to comply with regulations, but to take action to do something about it. We are also running an energy efficient cookstove program where we are empowering communities by providing for free these technologies that you see through various corporates. These improve energy efficiency in our rural areas where they are used to open fire cooking, exposing themselves to dangers of inhalation, respiratory infections from inhalation of these fumes. And it's critical that we install these technologies and protect our women and girls from hazards that are posed by open fire cooking. So what these technologies do is to improve energy efficiency by about 75%, and also ensure that they do not require big logs for cooking, but just twigs and shells of maize, even cow dung. Hence, it is easy to deal with the issue of deforestation. So we are running a rural household clean cooking initiative that will empower communities and reduce deforestation. Of course, I mentioned the issue of retrofitting of buildings. It is very critical. I'm happy there's legislation that is being done along the lines. It will be good to see to expand what we are seeing now, especially in the city of Harare, where some corporates have taken the initiative of installation of solar panels on their car parks and mini grids, mini solar power grids on their buildings and various institutions across the country. It is very critical. Let's not take these actions for granted. They are very important in reducing our carbon footprint. So this is just an example of a parking area that is solar powered. We can do the same even for rural areas. But the catch is not just you don't lose investment in buying this technology, but you can earn carbon credits from that. So we operate by ensuring that we assess on your behalf, we give options on your behalf, we manage the projects on your behalf, and we report on your behalf. We also champion corporates as global green champions in that. So I mentioned the benefits of carbon offset for corporates. You are likely going to be valued as a corporate from just by showing environmental corporate social responsibility. And then, of course, it's likely going to improve your business, other than the fact that there's need for compliance on international regulations. There's ease of reference to say this is the work we are doing to offset our carbon footprint. Hence, there's need for that recognition internationally. And of course, there's exemption from unnecessary pollution taxes, especially once you leave the borders of Zimbabwe, and visibility of your business and contracts with other NGOs that will be sustainably realized. With this, I thank you. We look forward to working with you and also to contribute our services to our country to be a greener and sustainable Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manyanga, who is the CEO for Grow a Tree Foundation and the founder of Grow a Tree Foundation. Now we just want to leave this time to a question and answer session. So to all our corporates in the house, this is your time to ask the presenters and the speakers on how you can venture into these investment opportunities, or maybe you have a question in line with the challenges you faced in trying to invest in this in climate change issues. So to all the corporates in the house, this is now, we now leave the floor to you. Do you have any questions? And you can pose your question directly to a particular presenter. If it's in line with partnership, you can direct it to Mr. Manyanga. If it's in line with strategies to embark on, we have Mr. Ndamba. So you can just direct your question to any one of the speakers. So the floor is yours.
Maybe mine is not just a question, it's a comment to comment just to all colleagues that I'm happy with the work that we've been doing with INSAF. Just recently, they adopted a school and they plan to expand again to other schools in the coming years. But the initiative has already taken a positive impact. I received a call last week from a colleague who also wanted to, is a former student of the school that INSAF adopted, and they actually have started showcasing what has happened in the USA. And already, I'm sure they were actually reviewing INSAF and seeing the kind of work that they're doing. But the key comment that came from him was that it has incited a lot of interest from various organizations outside of Zimbabwe to see how this can be expanded to all schools. So imagine if we are to cover all schools in the country and ensure that we certify them green and linking them with corporates, it will be really a good initiative. So I commend INSAF for a job well done, and we look forward to continue working with you on that basis.
Thank you so much, sir.
Maybe just a comment from my end as, I guess, a corporate who is having services done on sustainability by INSAF. So INSAF are our advisors on sustainability reporting. And it's just an encouragement from the process that we've engaged with them that, you know, when you start and you see all of these international benchmarks on sustainability, it always seems so far removed and very difficult, such that most corporates don't even want to start. So I'll just encourage to say, one, it's an imperative. The world is changing, and at some point, failure to adhere to sustainability issues will impact the markets you can enter, and you'll fall very short of regulation. And with us, I think INSAF has been pushing us to do more and more and more every year. It's not easy in the current economic climate, but what we've realized is starting is the most important step. Taking incremental steps, educating your main stakeholders, your management teams, your board, and eventually that momentum rises into something. So I think it's an encouragement to other participants who may not have started on the journey of taking sustainability issues seriously, that there's opportunities for incremental steps. And for us, we would want to speak more to all of the presenters who've presented here, just to find out, outside of the sustainability reporting side, which we deal with INSAF, what are the initiatives that we can tap into? So for example, the carbon credits, etc. So thank you to all the presenters. It was very insightful, and we are very committed to this journey, and we look forward to engaging you off the platform. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. Yes, afternoon, madam.
Okay, there's some noise in the background. My name is Sylvia from IDBZ. I just want to say thank you to all the presenters. We are being encouraged by what you have presented. And for Mr. Manyanga, we are planning to visit your project in Rushinga so that we get to learn more about what you are doing. But just to indicate that as a bank, we've also started on the sustainability reporting using the GRI standards. It's not an easy process, as it were, but we have tried, and we actually undergoing training for staff so that we are all on the same level in terms of reporting using those standards. I think it's Mr. Manyanga who said, I don't know if it's Mr. Manyanga, who are working on, we are there to support in terms of the carbon footprint. I think it's something that we are also going to be knocking on your doors, because as a bank, we have started on the process. I would really want to see our carbon footprint as a bank. So yeah, those were the two comments that I just wanted to make. But otherwise, the presentations were quite insightful and very useful for us. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, through you, Valerie, I'm happy I actually made a serious blunder. I wasn't aware that IDBZ is here. I think the very first program we did as Grow a Tree Foundation to demonstrate resilience in communities was done with IDBZ and the Rushinga project that we mentioned. Most of the pictures that we're seeing are actually a result of the investment of IDBZ direct to the communities. So we really commend IDBZ for the work that they've done. Actually, in terms of from the banking sector, it is the first bank that has actually started this initiative. So it is in our interest to demonstrate, actually, to show that it works. And I'm happy that you are planning a visit. I won't say much, but you will see for yourself when you get on the ground how much these partnerships will benefit our communities. So definitely, as part of our arrangement with IDBZ, is also to ensure we work with them together with INSAF as well, to ensure that they we understand their annual carbon footprint and help each other to calculate it against the investments that IDBZ is done. Because one critical fact that I wanted to mention is there's a lot of work that the bank is already doing or has been doing the past 10 or so years that has been contributing to positive climate action. But because there were no regulations or nothing or incentive to publicize this, it may appear as if the bank has been doing nothing when a lot has been done along those lines. So it is important to showcase what is being done by the bank and also to ensure that it is complying to international regulations as it is doing already, but also to demonstrate its understanding on deeper issues in terms of corporate social responsibility to communities. So it is a welcome initiative, and we are happy that IDBZ managed to see light in this, and they did not hesitate to assist our communities in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manyanga. Mr. Manyanga, there was a question posed by Angela from OKZIM in line with initiatives they can undertake in line with green investment opportunities with Grow a Tree Foundation. So maybe you could also answer that question.
Sorry, it's Angela from Dairy Board, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's Dairy Board. I wanted to say it. Sorry for that. I noticed it's Dairy Board. Yes, from what I've noted, I think Dairy Board has been in operations for quite some time, and there's countrywide businesses operations. So I mentioned two things. Number one, I'm not aware of what dairy board is doing in terms of its energy nexus, the consumption of energy annually. We may need to look into it and see the carbon footprint of a dairy board when it comes to energy issues. This also covers its water consumption as well as the transportation sector itself. So that's how we look into that. Is the whole operations, we assess them, their calculations that we, formulas that we use. And once that is done, we will table a report to the board and say, this is what we see as happening in terms of your carbon footprint. And then we'll also table options that we think are in sync with the vision and mission of Dairy Board. And then it will be up to Dairy Board as a corporate to take up that initiative and make a choice of what it would want to do. So the first step is maybe to engage each other and immediately work on it's not very difficult. It's getting the data that is available and also the projected actions of Dairy Board. So you know annually your operations, how they are like. You know where your bills go when it comes to electricity. You also know how much in terms of your bills when it comes to transportation. So once that is done, we then begin the process of, I would say in quotes, decarbonizing Dairy Board as a corporate in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Can I proceed?
Go on.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think as we look even in sustainability, there are quite some developments that are also coming in. I think one of the critical subjects which relates to climate change, it's a critical topic which was also part of our agenda in China as well, is the issue of biodiversity and how we also look into downstream operations, because the downstream operations also have a bearing in terms of the overall organization. So these are some of the upcoming issues that I think corporates may also need to start looking into. What I'm referring to downstream, for example, if you have small producers that feed into your main supply chain. So what actions are you taking to help those small producers manage issues relating to the environment and climate change at that level? So when you then take your products, let's say to the international market, they don't just look at you as the main supplier, but they can also extend to go downstream to your whole supply or your business value chain. So if there's anything that is amiss there, then it becomes also part of you, or it gets raised with you, and that can have also an implication on you. But I think what we are quite happy even from ourselves as INSAF is that the extent to which companies in Zimbabwe are coming forth to say this is what we can do using sustainability reporting, I think is very, very encouraging, and we want to continue, I think, to encourage that. Then it's also continue to expand the scope of what we are currently doing by adding more, indicators of our actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Manyanga, for your responses, and also thank you, Mr. Ndamba. I just want to ask, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Our time's up. We just want to appreciate all the corporates that attended this meeting. We also want to appreciate the presence of individuals that just have a personal interest in climate change issues that also attended the meeting. We want to give an amazing thank you to our presenters. They did exceedingly well, and it was very informative, and we learned a lot. And our hope as Grow a Tree Foundation is that every corporate within this meeting and those that you are also linked with will come and venture into green investment opportunities after this meeting. It's not only just a meeting, we are hoping to get into amazing partnerships with you for the sake of the climate. Thank you very much to our presenters. Thank you to our corporates. And this is the end of our meeting. For further information in line with the green investment opportunities, you can visit us on all our social media pages at Grow a Tree Foundation. And you can also email us at GTF22marketing to get in touch on how you can partner with us for green investment opportunities. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.